Hi, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. In today's episode, we're speaking with Rip Esselstyn, founder of PLANTSTRONG, an organization that is helping people lead healthier lives through plant-based nutrition. Rip is a New York Times bestselling author, world record holder, professional triathlete, former firefighter, and a sought-after public speaker. Join us today as we chat with Rip about living a plant-based lifestyle and how he empowers people to take control of their health. Good morning, Rip. How are you?
Hey, Kirk. I'm in Austin, Texas, and things are, I think we're going to get up to 70 something today. I swam this morning, had a big bowl of oatmeal with fruit on top. I'm ready to talk to you.
You ready to go? You look great. We are so honored, even a little nervous to have you here today. I am really, really, really excited. A few more blushes though. Plant-based for 33 years, right? So I've heard about that bowl of cereal that you have every day for 33 years.
Yeah.
I read yesterday that Game Changers is the most watched documentary on television. Is that true?
Yeah, it's got more. It now has more eyeballs on it than any other documentary ever, with over 100 million now to date. So that's pretty cool.
Congratulations. It's amazing. We saw the premiere here in Boulder, and the theater was just filled with athletes going crazy. It was really, really, really special. Watched your TEDx, and I am so excited to chat today. Yesterday, well, over the weekend, my family and I drove about 5 hours out, 5 hours back, visit my folks up in the mountains, and we listened to a couple of your podcasts. We listened to Dr. Ornish, and we listened to Mr. Dan Buettner and the Blue Zones, which fascinated my kids, by the way. They're like, let's move to Costa Rica. Let's go to Costa Rica. But here's what I love about the podcasts. What I love about the podcasts is that they seem to have this kind of subtle theme of helping others. It's not in your face. It's a little bit evangelistic, but it's just very subtle. Kind of I think you used the word nudge, just kind of a nudge. Here's some cool things to do in your kitchen with food. Here's some cool things to do with your pantry. Here's some cool things not to put on your counter, right? When you want to kind of change your environment, I think is the approach you took. So, with that as a backdrop, Rip, just to kick things off today, where does your story begin? It's fascinating, right? With being plant-based and the message that you're sharing with so many. How did it all start?
Yeah. So
we've got time.
So as you said, I've been after this now for 33 plus years, and it all started back in Cleveland, Ohio, with my father and his really groundbreaking, revolutionary research at the famed Cleveland Clinic, going back to 1984. So that's where it all began.
I love it. Are there some really memorable, or let's call it powerful, moments in those 30 plus years that you've been on this plant-based journey that really stand out, that really kind of helped you define, like, wow, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do?
Well, yes, absolutely. I look back to when I made the transition when I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, and that was in December of 1986. And so I started eating this way in January of 1987. And by kind of September of 1987, I had qualified to be a professional triathlete. I got my pro card, and I fueling myself this way. And so I really started, if you want to say, evangelizing the lifestyle starting in about 1988. My father already had some really profound evidence showing that you could not only halt, but you could also reverse heart disease. So that was pretty powerful. And I'm looking for some just some really key moments, as you kind of phrased it in your question. And, one would have to be when we had this little kind of bet to see who had the lowest cholesterol when I was at Fire Station 2. And that kind of was the genesis for my whole first book, The Engine 2 Diet. And I had no idea that, a bet could literally lead to where I am today. But that's kind of the way the dominoes fell and the way that kind of the dots connected. And then, writing my first book, that was huge, right? And all the work and the effort that went into that, and the pilot study with 62 people, and finding a publisher, and going on the morning shows, Today's Show, Good Morning America, CBS Morning Show, all that stuff. And then that leading to me getting this offer to be a healthy eating partner with Whole Food Market stores, and then becoming this healthy eating ambassador and spreading this message of hope and happiness. And then that leading to being involved in documentaries, and then me launching the Plant Strong podcast in 2019. And now this new brand that I've pivoted from Engine 2 to Plant Strong. And so to me, Kirk, the theme, as I'm kind of stringing this all together, is that it's like from one thing to the next, I've had to kind of overcome certain fears that I had. Well, who am I to write a book, right? And who am I to be a healthy eating ambassador? Well, who am I to do a podcast? Who am I to be involved in documentaries and all that stuff? And, eventually you just have to go, well, why not me? Right. And let's go for it. Let's take that leap of faith and let the chips fall where they may. And so what I've discovered along this journey is you got to get out of your comfort zone. It's so easy to not get out of your comfort zone and play it safe in life. But ultimately, that's not where the big growth comes. The big growth comes when you're scared shitless and you don't know if you're going to succeed or fail. But, it's like that Teddy Roosevelt quote, you know what? I may fail miserably, but at least I'm in the arena, with the sweat and the blood and the tears.
I showed up.
I'm swinging and I'm showing up. Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. Was it, speaking about being scared, just to go back to the Firehouse, that got a little personal, right? That was one of yours, right?
Oh.
It was one of your teammates that had the elevated cholesterol there. It became really personal very quickly.
Yeah. No, this was a guy who was, when I got out of the fire academy, I went to Fire Station 1. It's the animal house of all the fire stations.
Okay.
And literally it's in the heart of downtown. There's 2 engines, a ladder, an EMS vehicle. So at any one point in time, there's, and I'm not exaggerating, typically 18 guys in this firehouse, right?
Wow.
And you're sleeping in these open dorms, and the tone's always going off. And it's fair to say it's a pretty big testosterone fest. But I was there for about 5 years, and then I decided to make the move to Fire Station 2. And then that's when me and a couple of guys that I worked with at Fire Station 1, we went together. And so one of this, you said it was personal. This particular individual, JR, we had been together for 5 years at Fire Station 1. Then we went to 2 together, and then we had this bet, and his cholesterol came back and it was 344 milligrams per deciliter at the age of 33. And we quickly found out that he had a family history of men in his family dying before the age of 50 from heart attacks. Mm-hmm. So he was literally he was the next one in line for a fatal heart attack. And I dragged him aside and I said, JR, this is no, that you don't need to go down this path. There's a better way. Look at my father's research. Look how I've been fueling myself as a professional triathlete. And he was like, all right, let's do this. And so as a group of firefighters at Fire Station 2, and this is starting in 2003, we started with one meal, and then that one meal led to two meals, and then that led to every meal. And we'd come in at noon and get off at noon the following day. So eventually it was lunch, dinner, breakfast, and then lunch before we left. And then he also embraced this when he was home as well. And that's when he got the staggering, 146 point drop in 28 days.
That's the key. Took the good habits home when he was off for 48 hours, right? Yeah.
Yes. Not just at the Firehouse.
Just a great story, a legacy story.
Yeah.
Rip, I was going to mention that, I mentioned earlier that I sort of switched to a plant-based lifestyle about 4 years ago. But, I trained for years as a chef. My father's a master pastry chef by German standards, came over here in the 60s. And for much of my career, I worked with animal proteins in hotels, our family restaurant, the bakery, so on and so forth. So plant-based cooking and a plant-based lifestyle, came to my life, my family more recently. My training as a chef, I would always say, helped me find my voice, right? As a cook, as a chef, as a manager, as a leader. But now I find myself learning again. And I truly believe as an educator as well, that people are at their best when they're learning, right? Because they're curious and they're persistent about gaining more knowledge. This is a tough question. Do you still enjoy learning? Is that still part of your repertoire every day?
Oh, I love it. And that's why one of the reasons why I started the podcast. Right. And so every week I get to interview somebody, whether it's a scientist, a physician, a chef, an athlete, about all the reasons why they decided to go plant-based. And so I'm constantly learning from my guests. And then, when you do your due diligence and you do your homework and you read their books and do everything you need to do to make sure that you go in prepared for your interview, you're constantly learning, constantly growing. I don't want to ever get mired, in this place where I feel like I know it all, because I always want to be a student of life. And I think that's something that will serve me well in this lifetime. But you mentioned, so let me ask you a question. What inspired you to kind of make the transition and go kind of, up your game and go into plant-based?
Great question. For me, and I'm getting a little personal as well. 40 years ago, believe it or not, I had a kidney transplant. My father donated the kidney, and my father's still doing great. He's 85 years old, and I'm doing great. So this 40 years ago was experimental surgery, right? So at a university hospital and all of that. And so as you age a little bit, I started noticing, and I'd like to exercise and all that, but I started to notice, and my blood work was changing a little bit, and my doctors were saying, hey, how about thinking about some adding some plants to your diet. And then around that same time, I mentioned earlier, I was hanging around with some of my older colleagues and stuff that had already moved to a plant-based lifestyle. I met Derek, and I met Ken, and I met some other folks, and I knew how to cook, right? It was just a matter of being disciplined. And within, to your point, and I can't make this stuff up, Rip, within a 6-month time frame, I took maybe not over 100 points, but I took a lot of points off of my cholesterol.
Right.
A lot. And I felt different. I wasn't ready to run a marathon.
Yeah.
And I wasn't interested in running a marathon. I just wanted to feel great. So I could be a good father and a good leader, here at the school.
Yeah.
And there, for me, there was no turning back. And my wife had been vegetarian for many years. So it was an easy fix. But for me, I got a little scared. And I got comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
just living my life. Right. And yeah, that fear made me make that change and make it quickly. And
Well, you know what's,
I'll
yeah.
never go
Well,
back. Yeah.
so do you have one kidney right now?
I have one kidney. That's
Yeah.
correct.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, what's interesting is animal protein is very, very hard on certain organs, specifically the kidneys and the liver. And so, you know, something about the sulfuric containing amino acids that are much more elevated in animal protein really make the
Kidney
kidney
work harder. Yeah. Yeah.
work a lot
Yeah.
harder. Exactly. So, you know, the fact that you're transitioning or already have embraced a plant-based diet is very smart, and your kidney will thank you for that.
Yeah. 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 And in 40 years, and when I talk to my, my physicians, and they don't really have any data. I don't know if I'm the longest living, recipient of a kidney, but I'm probably pretty close
Wow. Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
records that they keep. Right. So, yeah. So I've never felt better. So, no changes for me. No. And so films like Game Changers, I mean, I know a lot of people were probably charged up during that film. I cried during that film because
Mm,
I couldn't believe how powerful it was. Right.
yeah.
So Scott, the long distance runner.
Scott
Yeah,
Jurek.
yeah. He was in the crowd. He was in the crowd. And when he came up onto the screen, the
Yeah.
crowd went crazy, just crazy, it's a good community to be a part of.
Oh,
100%. Yeah.
it's, it,
Yeah.
it's the best. It absolutely is the best.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So your father, let's talk about, I've listened to Caldwell a lot on YouTube and such. Prolific physician and researcher. That's key, right? He founded the heart disease reversal program at the Cleveland Clinic, as you mentioned, and he wrote the New York Times bestselling guide, Prevent and Reverse Heart
Yeah.
Disease.
Right here. Here it is.
There it is. There it is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely changed the world, right? So he's also one of the original promoters, if I say that right, of a whole foods and plant-based diet, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Yep. I mean, you know, I think if you were to go back and look at it, I mean, there's William Kempner, there's Pritikin, there's Ornish, there's McDougall, there's my
yeah,
father, you know,
great names, great
there's
names.
also John Robbins, you know, Diet for New America.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So were there some? I mean, as a child, was there some influence on you started a plant-based diet a little bit later, right? When you were a triathlete and such, but growing up, was there an influence around, taking care of yourself?
Absolutely. It was interesting because I always watched my father, and he'd always be like reading on, you know, diet and nutrition. He had this kind of insatiable thirst for it. And I can tell you, in our house growing up, we ate just like everybody else. The one thing that my parents did not allow in our house was white bread or soda pop. But otherwise, you know, almost everything, you know, everything was fine. And that all came to a screeching halt in 1984 when he started his research at the Cleveland Clinic. And he was like, to my mother, he's like, listen, Ann, if we're going to ask these initial 22 patients to eat a whole food plant-based diet with no meat, no dairy, no processed refined foods, then we need to do it as well.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
they started that, and I was off at college, but when I would come home for Christmas, Thanksgiving, summertime, this is how they were eating, right? And I was so excited for them, for the research my father was embarking on. You know, a lot of people were like, did you like, you know, revolt and, you know, rebel against this? I'm like, no, I've always loved and adored and respected my father so much. And so I was just like, yeah, let's do this. And I saw how hard he basically took one day a week off his surgery schedule so he could do this research. And he got, you know, approval from up above. And every Tuesday when I was home, I would see him. He'd be in the kitchen, he'd be on phone calls, and he would be calling each one of his patients because they would come on Mondays. They meet with him. They go over their food journal with him. He'd draw their blood. He'd do a complete lipid panel, weigh them, blood pressure, and he'd call them with the results the next day. And it was always super exciting because everybody's numbers were just like dropping, you know, off a cliff. And he was like, "You're doing great, keep it up." Or he'd have to say, "Hey, you know, there's something a little bit amiss here. Let's talk and figure out what exactly is going on." Mm-hmm. But he held their hand for 5 years. He saw them every other week for 5 years.
Isn't that something?
Wow. Right. He was not going to let these patients slip through the cracks. And then after he felt confident enough after 5 years that he then pushed it back to once every month for the next 5 years. And
which is still a lot.
Oh yeah, exactly. But these patients knew in their heart that they had a amazing cheerleader and somebody that was, you know, not gonna let them go. So, you know, he's a stern taskmaster, but there's a lot of love behind it all too.
Yeah. I love that. Now, I don't believe you studied medicine formally, you know, no. like your father did, but in many ways, when I hear you speak, you're a healer in your own right, right? How has your father responded to your work?
Well, that's nice of you to say that. And he is he's a big cheerleader of what I'm doing. And the great thing is that I've been able to, so starting in 2010, I started throwing these 7-day immersion programs with Whole Food Market's sickest, unhealthiest team members. They had to medically qualify because their numbers were so bad for Whole Foods to basically subsidize them going. And since 2010, I've probably hosted 20 of these for close to 2,000 Whole Food team members. And the beautiful thing is every time that I've run one of these, I invite my mom and my father to join.
Okay.
So we've had the privilege of working together now for 10, 11 years. Every time I throw one of these, they join me. For a number of years, I would throw 3 or 4 weekend events. They were always invited. They always came as well. So we've kind of hand in hand been able to work together to really get this message out to as many people as possible. But no, he doesn't lather a lot of, false praise on people. He never has. But he in his own way has made it very well known to me how proud and happy he is of what I've done and how I've contributed in this space.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Just working with your parents, with your family is pretty rewarding, right? It's I remember back in the day when we had a family restaurant and my father did the pastry and I did the cuisine. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we were making it happen right together. And it was a beautiful time.
Yep.
I was fascinated. I mentioned earlier by the conversation with Dan Buettner about the blue zones, right? And I caught the one piece, the acronym LIONS, right? Loma Linda, California, Ikaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Kawa, Costa Rica, and Sardinia, Italy. And I didn't know this, but these 5 cities are cities where people tend to live longer, right? And what was most fascinating to me, is that it was really about one's environment, their surroundings that made a difference, right? And I think we both believe, from what I've heard, that finding one's purpose in life is really, really, really important, right? So, tough question, right? Do you believe that a plant-forward diet can help people find a healthier purpose? And to get there, are their surroundings and their environment really that important?
Well, I don't know. I I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that by, going plant-based, it'll be easier for you to find your passion in life or your purpose.
Uh-huh.
Unless that passion and that purpose is somehow intertwined with plant-based.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Then
Okay.
if that's the case, then absolutely. And, I think the thing that Dan has been able to do with the blue zones and point out, is that when your environment is conducive to this, whether it's, you got to walk and commute by 2 miles to get to work, you've got gardens everywhere, you have all this social engagement because you're plugged into, this club, this church, this, 5 o'clock, whatever. When the healthy choice is just a natural, easy choice, then that's the best way for it to just kind of happen. You don't have to like go out of your way and work your ass off for it to happen. And I think that's what he's found is kind of one of the themes in every one of the cities that you mentioned there, from, Loma Linda all the way to Sardinia, Italy. And then I think the extent that we can do that here in our lives, is very meaningful and helpful. So for example, I every morning, actually 6 days a week, I swim with a master's team.
Okay.
And I've been doing that now for over 25 years. And it's a group of guys and gals, and, we support each other, we cheer each other on, and there's a certain level of accountability as well.
Mm-hmm.
I live in a house with my wife and my 3 kids, and everybody's plant-based. And so, the plant-based, that's the only choice we have in our house. It's not like we have a house divided and one side of the refrigerator are the animal products and the dairy, and the other side's the plant-based. So that to me is really nice. We live in a community where we have community centers. And so you can walk to the pickleball courts or to the swimming pool or to the basketball. And so all that is kind of natural and easy. So I think the extent to which you can, make all that stuff very natural and easy is going to be hugely beneficial for you. And I also understand that not everybody has that luxury in America right now.
Sure.
And so I would tell you, if that's the case, then figure out what you got to do and make it happen. And I know it's, for a lot of people, it's going to be an uphill battle, and that's okay too. Because you're worth it. You're worth it. Your health is worth it. And, this isn't, for a lot of people, this isn't going to be easy, but God, it's going to be worthwhile. And you will thank yourself in 5-10 years.
Speaking of worthwhile, your first best-selling book, in the Engine 2 Diet, although it includes recipes and meal plans, it's really more than a cookbook. It's essentially a life-saving guide on, how to change your habits to save your life or improve your life. Right? Really, really powerful. Was that the intention when you set out to write that book?
That's a really good question, because when I decided to write the book, it was just going to be about what me and some of the guys at the Firehouse decided to do, and then have some recipes. But I decided that, I gotta show the efficacy of eating this way. And so I want to do a pilot study, much like my father did with his heart patients. And so I was able to get 62 people within 2 weeks that agreed to eat this way. And I got a medical director on board. I got a laboratory where we could check blood, do blood draws venously through the vein. And never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that for the most part, healthy people would get these kind of dramatic results in weight loss, in total cholesterol drop, in LDL, in triglycerides, in fasting glucose. And it set the stage for the book. And it made me so confident that this is the way to do this. And so after I had written the book and we were trying to come up with a title for the book that's why the subtitle, Kirk, is the Texas Firefighters 28-day save your life plan that will burn away the pounds and lower cholesterol. But going into it, I had no idea what it was going to be. And it's probably like sometimes when you're diving into a recipe and you don't exactly know how it's going to turn out, and you just kind of, you let your intuition and kind of guide you a little bit. And it worked out better than I ever could imagine, that first book. And so happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so fast forward, when you look at the marketplace today, obviously plant-based is not a trend. It's here, right? And there's a lot of information coming at us, right? Or plant-based offerings, right? Meatless products, things like that. How can any advice for the consumer to have confidence in knowing that what they're buying is actually healthy for them?
Yeah. So there is a ton of plant-based products that are littering the shelves of every grocery store right now. And I would say that probably 90 to 95% of those are not healthy products, right?
Yeah.
They're plant-based, but they're loaded with, the second, third, fifth ingredients, probably some sort of oil. They typically have gobs of sodium in them, all kinds of sugar. A lot of these dogs and burgers and nuggets and cheeses are loaded with soy protein isolates and concentrates. So they're not actually a whole food. So I would tell you to do just a couple of things. One is you want to check the ingredients and make sure that the ingredients don't have more than 3 different types of sugar. Make sure that there's no, if you can, no oils in there. And then also, actually, that's about it with the ingredients. With nutritional facts panel, I would tell you to, look and see how much fat is in this product. And if it's over 25% of the calories are greater than fat, then you want to be kind of careful with that one and maybe leave it on the shelf. The other thing is sodium. Our guideline is we want the sodium to remain in a 1-to-1 ratio. This is a guideline. It doesn't have to be perfect, but a 1-to-1 ratio as far as, so if the calories are 180, we want the milligrams of sodium to be 180 or less. And there's not too many products that fit that bill there. And then the last thing is going to be the sugars. And with the new label guidelines, companies now have to list how many grams of added sugar are in the product. And that's really, really helpful. And I would tell you, you want to make sure that there's no more than 4 to 5 grams of added sugar that's in that product. But that's just a rough, I have these, if you get either my first book or my third book, I have a whole chapter on how to read a label and how to become a label reading ninja warrior, because they're really sneaky right now with all these new products.
Well, so education is an important piece of it. Some objections, that you hear to plant-based diets, for example, they're hard to maintain. People have to reorganize their pantry. My options are limited or expensive.
Yeah, I would tell you that this is not expensive. This is actually the most economical way to eat on the planet. Especially, when you look at it, this is really just peasant food. It is, it is bananas, it's potatoes, it's rice, it's beans. You don't have to go to, Whole Food Market and buy a organic red bell pepper at $5.99 a pound in order to make this lifestyle work. Not for a second. So you can do, if you want to do organic, that's fine. If you want to do conventional, by all means, conventional. Don't let organic versus conventional get in your way. You can do frozen. I find frozen is super economical. You should see our freezer at home. We've got stacks and stacks of different green leafy vegetables, berries, black-eyed peas, rice, quinoa. It's pretty phenomenal now what you can get frozen just for the convenience factor. And when it comes to variety, there are thousands of different types of beans, fruits, whole grains, vegetables. And so if for some reason you're getting bored, it's just, I'm going to put it on you. It's a lack of imagination. And you could probably ask Kirk here and all of his different chefs at Escoffier, and I bet you that they're finding that, oh my God, plant-based opens up a whole new vast cornucopia of plant-based delectability that we never realized was even there. So it's a matter of kind of perceptions and letting people realize that this is the most economical, healthy, and variety paved way to eat on the planet. And more and more people are realizing that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Super great advice. I'm going to come back to that in 1 second, but
yeah,
before I forget, I just wanted to mention, I was actually born in Chicago, grew up there before we moved to Colorado, and two of my lifelong friends, childhood friends, became firefighters in downtown Chicago. And so I'm just so curious, you went from being a professional athlete to a firefighter. How did that happen? I don't want to wrap up today without knowing the answer to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I had been doing this triathlon gig now for almost a decade, and I was 33 years old. I've been doing it since I was 23. And frankly, I was like, what's my next move going to be? Right. And I had some triathlete buddies. They weren't professional, but they were age groupers, and they were firefighters here in Austin. And they were like, Rip, firefighting is a pretty amazing job. You go to work, usually, 4 to 5 people on the crew. It's kind of like a big slumber party. And during that slumber party, about anywhere from 5 to 15 times the tone goes off, and you have to go on medical calls or water rescue calls or make a fire or, lifting assistance. And I'm like, wow. So I actually went, and you can do you can spend a day at one of the firehouses. You have to fill out the paperwork, and then you can go. And so I spent a whole day at Fire Station 1, going on calls and hanging out at the house. And I was like, this
is cool.
This is cool. This is a dream. And for somebody like me that, was a little bit, I spent the last decade just, gallivanting all over the globe, swimming, biking, and running. I needed a little bit of an adrenaline pumped, next move. And so firefighting fit that bill perfectly. And I was fortunate enough to get on with the Austin Fire Department in 1997.
Wow.
Yeah.
And giving back, it's kind of the theme of your life, though, right? Giving back. The stories that my buddies tell me, it's not just fighting fires, it's helping people.
Yeah. Well, and what I have discovered is that the brotherhood and the sisterhood of firefighters throughout the world, there is such an amazing bond there, and almost all of them have these huge, wonderful, magnanimous hearts, and they are just salt of the earth, just a wonderful tribe of human beings. And I will always be, a emergency first responder of sorts, and so grateful for the 12 years that I was a firefighter for the city of Austin, and the relationships that I made, and everything that I learned along the way.
I love it.
Yeah.
So here at Escoffier, over the last year, we've been kind of busy. We launched an online plant-based diploma and associate's degree.
Wow.
And we also launched a diploma here in Boulder on ground for residential students who don't want to go to school online. That launched in September. Both programs have been wildly popular. Great students with unbelievable, questions and curiosity. Because this little chat that we've had today will be pushed out to a bunch of our students, upwards of 10,000 students. What advice would you give to students or even more specifically, plant-based culinary entrepreneurs for whatever they want to do, make a restaurant better or create a food truck. What's Rip's few words of advice? No pressure.
Well, I think that if you are going down this path and you're at Escoffier because this is something that resonates with you and you have a passion for, then you definitely are going to be kind of riding that wave, that plant-based wave. And it is cresting and it's about 50 feet tall. And so you could not be in a better place at a better time in history. And, you mentioned it, Kirk, but between, I think, most restaurants realizing that they've got to have some pretty kick-ass plant-based options because this is the way this world is heading. Whether, if you're entrepreneurial and you want to start a food truck or a restaurant or something like that, or a food delivery business or, service. Like in Austin here, I have people all the time saying, can you point me to somebody that makes whole food plant-based meals? And there's nobody. So, I mean, there's all kinds of gaps and openings right now, but everybody eats. And when you connect all the dots and you realize that in 2022, you've got, we've got record levels of obesity, record levels of chronic Western disease, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and that almost all of these are manifestations of us eating unhealthy American food, the meat, the dairy, the processed refined foods. Let me figure out exactly where I wanted to go with that because it was good.
It's opportunity. There's opportunity out there.
Well, no, and the opportunity, it is nutty. I know. So, but between, what we got going on right now with our health, between what you got going on right now with the fact that, Mother Earth is crying for help, and the greatest thing that we can do to reduce our carbon footprint and reduce carbon emissions is eat a plant-based diet. Sustainability, kindness, right, to all these animals we share the planet with. I really believe that over the next 10 years, this will be we as a country will be plant forward. And I think, Malcolm Gladwell says that the tipping point is when you get like to 10%. And if I'm not mistaken, we're approaching 8% right now of people in America that basically are self-proclaimed vegans, plant-based eaters. So this is happening and it's happening fast. And, look for the opportunities because they should be everywhere. I mean, hospitals, if they're intelligent, will be doing stuff with their menu planning. Like I said, restaurant, food trucks, personal, services, athletes that are looking to eat better, are looking to fuel themselves with this kind of high octane fuel. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, no, great advice. Really, really appreciate that.
And then the other thing, Kirk, that I completely left out is what I'm doing right now is all these plant-based products that, like I mentioned, most of them right now are unhealthy. So, for example, we're looking for people to help us with product development. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I would imagine that all these startup food companies are looking for people to help them with product development and how can they make this, lasagna that meets these standards? How can they make this waffle mix or this soup, right? So all kinds of opportunities.
Great opportunities. So Rip, the name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish. So if I had to ask you, what is in your mind the ultimate dish? And it can be a specific dish. It can be, who you're dining with, but in your world, what's the ultimate dish?
Can I tell you two?
I'd love to.
I've got two. So the first would be what I start every morning with, and it's, named after myself. It's the Rip's Big Bowl cereal. And it is 4 different whole grains that I mix together. It's rolled oats. It's Ezekiel 4-9 nuggets. It is Uncle Sam's wheat flakes. And then it's also bite-sized shredded wheat. So I take those 4, mix them together, throw in a little bit of ground flaxseed meal, chia seeds, walnuts, and that's my base every morning. And then to that, I will add either mango, banana, grapefruit, pomegranate seeds, or they're not called pomegranate seeds. What are they? Pomegranate aeols or something like that.
That's right. That's right. Right. Very good.
but the beautiful thing is, it always is changing, because depending upon the fruit that I put on top of it, and what I'm feeling like that day, kiwi, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries. It's absolutely endless. So that's one of my ultimate dishes. The other ultimate dish is, there's a variation of it in every one of my books, and it's the Raise the Roof sweet potato lasagna that everybody loves. And this is a dish that we make almost every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every big kind of holiday. And it is the cleanest, tastiest lasagna that I've ever had. And it recreates itself really easily and really well. And it is the bomb. Absolutely. And then I've got to have a third, because this third ultimate dish is
full podium.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Gold. Yes. And this is just rice and beans extravaganza. So it's brown rice, it's black beans, and it's a big heaping thing of brown rice. And on top of that, I will throw almost, a cup and a half of black beans. And then on top of that, I will put water chestnuts. I will put really finely cut kale, tomatoes, bell peppers, green onions, avocado, salsa, and then a little bit of low sodium tamari. And I could eat that every night for dinner. And it's low cost, high color, just hits every one of your taste buds. I love it. And I love the simplicity of it too.
I absolutely love it. Hey, Rip, this has been so much fun. You're the first one to give us 3 ultimate dishes.
Couldn't help. I couldn't help myself.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We have a school in Austin, a residential school. So I come down now and again. I don't think I want to challenge you to a swim off or a run, but I'll come cook off. I'll come cook with you anytime, Rip. I
would love that. Yeah.
I so appreciate the time. Thank you. And thank you for everything that you're doing out there.
Oh yeah. Kirk, thank you to you and Escoffier, and, all the things you guys are doing in the plant-based world now. And, thank you for making that leap into plant-based. It is so worthwhile. And for all your listeners out there, more plants, Plant Strong is where it's at. So give it a go.
Well said, Rip. Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast, where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.